Evening, everybody. I am Christina from Urgewald, this is my colleague Katrin.
Hi.
And we're going to do the webinar for you guys today. I will actually record the webinar to make it available for others that wanted to join us but couldn't join us yet today. And we will make it on available online later. But we will turn off the recording for the question and answer session at the end, so that you guys don't have to worry about being somewhere on the internet exposed with your name and questions. Yeah, other than that, I think you have already figured out that you can ask questions in between, just write them down and then we see them. And then we try to address them while we talk, and otherwise, again, we have the question and answer session at the end. So I will start out now to give you a bit of an overview of the global coalexit list, and then Katrin will later go into more technical details on how to use the Excel sheet and which column means what. So let me see.
Yeah, and maybe just say again, especially as we're not so many people as this morning today, just feel free to hammer in questions in between so we can directly refer to them.
Yeah, exactly. Katrin, can you see my full screen now?
I think so. I see us and the screen. I think it's fine.
Okay.
Did you start recording?
I did start recording, yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's funny now because I don't see myself anymore, just the presentation, but I see that the camera is still on. So anyway, so we wanted to talk to you guys about the global coalexit list and a little bit about why did we do it and how did we do it and so forth. So initially we got the idea of doing this global coalexit list during and after the campaign that we did on the Norwegian government in 2015. Katrin?
Can you start again? I think you were frozen.
I was frozen? Okay.
Yeah, you were frozen. I will just switch off my webcam to make things a bit easier.
Okay. So. Otherwise, I can also switch off my cam if my connection is bad. Just let me know. So the idea to do this global coalexit list, this database of the whole global coal industry, basically, came during and after the campaign on the Norwegian government pension fund. And the interesting thing at the time was that the Norwegian government pension fund publishes their holdings. So once a year, they make a list and they show you the 8,000 plus companies that they're invested in. That was in 2015. Now they're invested in more than 10,000 companies. So that was for us great because first of all, we're not used to so much transparency from Germany, but it also gave us a chance to do an analysis of what are actually the companies that the pension fund is involved in and how many coal companies are in there. And what was really interesting at the time is that Norges Bank said, yeah, but no, we don't really need to do divestment because our exposure to coal is very little. We only invest 267 million euros in the coal industry. And we did our analysis and we came up with a number that was 32 times as high, 8.8 billion. So we thought, okay, that's a bit odd, like it can't be that Norges Bank is lying, like just like that. That's really absurd. Where does this discrepancy between our numbers come from? And we found out that to classify its investments, Norges Bank uses the industry classification benchmark, which sort of subdivides investments into different categories and has over 150 sub-industries. And what we found was that the industry classification benchmark is really good at identifying coal mining companies, as you can see here under the basic materials, basic resources mining, and then coal. But anything next to coal mining that has to do with coal is not seen by this benchmark. So all the other parts of the coal industry are not covered. And for us, all of this also belongs to the coal industry. So the exploration companies, the companies that search for new coal reserves, the companies that mine the coal, the companies that transport the coal, build new coal harbors, new coal railways, transport the coal, companies that turn coal into gas and oil, companies that that engineer and build new coal power plants, and the companies that burn the coal. They're all part of it. And so we decided, okay, like, since this information is not somehow available, then maybe we just have to research it ourselves. How hard can it be, right? So how did we identify these companies? Well, first, we had a really good base after we did the research on the Norwegian Government Pension Fund, and from all the experience that we had through our coal campaigns before, we knew a lot of coal companies. So that was a really good starting point. And then we worked with the Metal and Mining Bulletin, which was really good to find the exploration companies, so the companies searching for entirely new coal reserves, and also mining companies. And then we also just looked at the lists of coal associations, national and international coal associations, to see who are the members, so who are basically the companies that identify themselves as coal companies. So with that, we had a relatively good cover of mining and everything that had to do with exploration and that type of, that side of the coal value chain. And then we looked at the Coal Swarm database, which I think a lot of you also know is an NGO-based database, which shows all coal plants that are in the build, that are either existing or in the planning worldwide. So the power plants themselves, the new ones. We looked at plots also to identify these coal plants, and from them come to the companies. And then we used Bloomberg. At that point, we already had quite a long list of possible coal companies, and the Bloomberg research wasn't actually very fruitful. And we also looked at divestment lists of other institutions, such as KLP, another investor in Norway, and also NGO divestment lists, such as the Carbon Underground, and additional NGO information, like from the Coal Wire and such. So all in all, we then came to 3,000 companies, and we went in depth and we researched those 3,000 companies. We looked, wherever it was possible, we looked at company-owned informations, so the annual reports of the companies, investors' presentations, and other information that was available on the company's websites. Where we had to make an exception was for China, because it was really hard to get the information there, and there we also worked with Chinese researchers who helped us, because basically our language skills weren't there. And there we worked also with reports from credit agencies. For the coal-fired power plants in the planning, again, we worked with Coal Swarm. So from these 3,000, we then sort of diluted it down and identified 775 companies that we can really say, hey, they are the coal industry. They are really big and important players in the coal industry. And 2/3 of them are mining companies and power companies, and 1/3 are services. So again, what I told you before, like the transport companies, the exploration companies, the engineering and construction companies, and so forth. And we identified an additional 1,100 subsidiaries and joint ventures. And we basically say, so every coal parent company that is on the global coal exit list, all its subsidiaries should also be divested. So the global coal exit list really in the end has become a database that captures most of the world's coal production. 88% of global coal production is covered in the global coal exit list, or differently put, the companies on the global coal exit list are the ones that are responsible for 88% of world coal production, and 86% of the coal-fired capacity that is installed in the world. And again, the service companies. So how did we choose between the 3,000 in the beginning and the 775? How did we choose which ones to include and which not? We really wanted to capture the bulk of the industry, the top, so the largest of every segment, and we also really wanted to cover the companies that are expanding in the coal industry, that are building new coal-fired power plants, that are expanding mines, and that really still count on coal to be there in the next 50 years. So the first criterion that we developed is the percentage criterion, or that we used to identify companies that we would put on the global coal exit list. So those are the ones that have a coal share of revenue or a coal share of power production of over 30%. And that basically means that, you know, if more than 1/3 of a company's business is coal, then it will be really hard for the company to change, and it's basically just a coal company, and it should be on this list, and it should be divested. The coal share of revenue, to calculate that, we really took every segment of what the company does, all the activities, and included that to come up with the coal share of revenue. Sometimes we had to make estimations, and if you look into the Excel sheet, which actually I have also again uploaded here under files in the webinar, so you should be able to download it. You can see these larger than and smaller than signs sometimes, and when you see that, then that means that we have made an estimation. And for the coal share of power production, we, wherever it was possible, we worked with the actual energy generated energy, so generated gigawatt hours of electricity, wherever that was possible. And where it wasn't possible, then we worked with the capacity numbers, so how much coal power capacity has the company installed. You see that in the Excel sheet in red. We used the produced energy wherever possible because it just gives you a much better picture of how important actually coal power is in the company's overall portfolio. Because, you know, coal power plants, they usually run a lot longer than, for example, renewable plants. So the actual generated capacity tells you a lot better. Some investors have, when they have done a coal divestment, have worked with this percentage criterion. So the Allianz and which is basically the world's largest insurance company, and from Germany, and the Norwegian government pension fund, they both adopted this 30% revenue and power production criterion, and they both divested around 4 billion euros. The second criterion that we used was the absolute criterion. So we said, you know, if a company has a certain size, no matter how high their coal share of revenue is or their coal share of power production, they should be on this list. They're a big coal player. And we said every company that mines more than 20 million tons of coal per year must be on this list. So this is approximately the size or the consumption of a mid-sized country like Italy. 20 million tons is quite large. And 10 gigawatt of installed coal capacity, we use that as an equivalent to the 20 million tons. It's first we wanted to use consumption numbers. So for the utilities, how much coal do they burn? But in most countries, it's really hard to find out this information, and it's really hard to make estimations because you don't know how long the power plants run, you don't know what the quality of the coal is, you don't know many different factors. So we said, okay, there we work with the installed capacities, because if you have more than 10 gigawatt of coal capacity installed, then most probably you will burn at least 20 million tons of coal per year. So the reason why this absolute threshold was really important to us was that some of the largest coal producers in the world are highly diversified companies, and they have a coal share of revenue of a lot less than 30%. So they're not covered by the 30% criterion. And an example for that is Glencore from Switzerland. They're the 8th largest coal producer in the world. but no industry classifying benchmark or anything would ever say that Glencore is a coal company because they're so hugely diversified. But actually, one of Glencore's top executives is the chairman of the World Coal Association, which is the industry's most important lobby group. So Glencore, really important actor in the coal industry, often not recognized as one, and we wanted to make sure it is on the global coalexit list. The third criterion, like I said before, is about expansion, so the future of coal, basically. And we said, okay, so every company that is planning to build more than 300 megawatt of new coal should be divested, and if companies have concrete plans to expand mines or even develop completely new mines, they should also be on the global coalexit list. So for this, for these companies, for these expansion companies, we made like a little bit of a sub list, which I think some of you might also have heard. We have identified the 120 companies that are planning the biggest and the most, what we call the most aggressive new coal-fired power plants, so that are really wanting to build new plants and want to produce coal electricity for the next 40 years to come. And we made a little bit of a separate list that we also published separately, but it is coming from without the global coalexit list. So the global coalexit list is really then as a database, and we have taken these criteria that I will explain to you to identify which are the largest expanders. So on this coal plant developers list that we have additionally identified, we have added all companies that will build more than 3,000 megawatt of new coal plants. The most aggressive companies for whom coal is really part of their business strategy, and the companies that are building new coal plants in countries that do not have any coal power yet, and there's quite some. And the reason why we made such a big fuzz about these expansion companies is that often they are not traditional coal players. They're not the companies that everybody thinks about when they think of, oh, coal, or the ones that they think, oh, the big utilities that already have a lot of coal plants, they are the ones building the new coal plants as well. But this is often not true. We have found that, like companies like Petro-Vietnam, which, is an oil company, is building 3,600 megawatt of new coal plants in a country like Vietnam, really at the forefront of coal expansion. Or Marubeni from Japan, which is a large trading house, a hugely diversified company, which is also basically found in the investment portfolios of every large Western investor, which are planning almost 6,000 megawatt of new coal capacity in a lot of these countries that have little or no coal power yet at all, like Botswana, Egypt, but also countries that have a bit more already, like Indonesia, Japan, Mongolia, Myanmar, Philippines, South Africa, and Vietnam. And we really wanted to show that some of the companies that are still betting on coal for the future, they are often not recognized. I will now pass on to Katrin, which will give you a bit more detail on the Excel sheet, the columns, and how to use them. And I will mute myself in the meantime. Katrin, are you there?
Yeah. So, hi again, everybody. Yes, let's go through the Excel sheet. I hope all of you had a look at it already at some point, and maybe are a bit familiar or played around a bit with it already. So the idea was now to go a bit more in depth. First of all, what we call the companies columns, like the basic columns to explain the first two ones again. So on the left side is only the name of the parent company listed. In blue is lines which really show only the parent and also along the whole line the criteria of the parent company. Underneath in white is just to see to which parent the subsidiary belongs to, which you find on the right side. So it's really, the left side is mainly to use for sorting the list, really. If you look on the second column on the company called company, there you really find what is the name of the parent and what is the name of the subsidiary. And again, in blue you find really the line which is the parent column, and on white you find the subsidiaries. So, but in order to be able to sort, for example, say in a way to make sure that you have all Adanis underneath each other, you can as well just sort them via the parent company column. The coal industry sector, yeah, as you saw before, we make three main differences. We differentiate between mining, power, and service companies. Mining companies, for those where we see this is the main segment, and mining is written down everywhere where we find any kind of mining activities, like building new mines, but also annual coal production. Power companies, respectively, everywhere where we have any installed coal power capacity, or where new power plants are built, which are later supposed to be owned by that company also, so which are potential power companies. Service companies is all kind of companies which belong to the third, more not classical segment. So here we subsumed all trading houses, engineering companies, finance companies, coal to gas, coal to liquids, railway providers, transport companies. Country of headquarters, I guess, is clear. For country of coal activity, how we get to that was you will see it later also in another explanations, that everywhere where we have new coal power plants planned or new mines planned, these countries are listed here, but of course also the places where companies already having mines or coal-fired power plants, or where they have active railways, for example. For some companies, we couldn't, especially like the trading companies, we couldn't make out really a company of activity, because like a trading company obviously buys coal from all over the world to one certain country, so there we only choose the country of headquarters. Yeah, next slide, please. To the power columns. So we find here, when we're starting from the left, starting with the expansion plans of the company. Some might have wondered why we have two different columns, one which is called expansion plans called power prorated, and one expansion plans called power total. So when we look at total, we just added up all projects a company is involved in. And so you see, when all the projects the company is involved in are actually realized, how many megawatt of coal-fired power will be newly installed in the world. But in order to also show better what role a company plays in the new coal power plant development, and in order also to add up all the numbers and see how big is the megawatt which will be newly installed in the world when all these companies are active, we use like a prorated number. So here we tried, for example, if 3 companies are involved in a project, we divided the number obviously just to 3. But in some projects, we also knew that there's like a main shareholder with 65%, another one with 30%, and so on. So in this case, we prorated the megawatt according to the percentage they hold in this project where this was available. Right next to it, you find the countries of coal power expansion, obviously the places where the expansion takes place. And then for the power companies, important is the two columns on the right side, the installed coal power capacity. So this is fixed capacity numbers, how they are right now. And next to it, the coal share of power production, which we usually had to calculate ourselves. In some cases, it's given, but mainly we had to look at the megawatt hours, which you find in the annual reports of all power plants a company has, and then we had to calculate it ourselves. And in this case, sometimes this was not given, the gigawatt hours or megawatt hours, whatever you had, and we just had installed capacity numbers. In this cases, we still wanted to provide you with, but we marked it as red. So you can see that this is just a capacity number, and the part. And if you look at power produced, the number is much higher because coal power plants run a lot in comparison to windmills. Yeah, I think that's enough for power for now. So can you, next slide, please?
Yeah, I already went to mining. Can you see it?
Yeah. So mining. We also start with expansion on the left side, countries of coal mining expansion. The reason why we just display countries here and not certain numbers is because it was really hard for us to give a certain number of something. You don't have like a clear aim of building 1,000 megawatt power plant, or to have like a mine which in the end will produce 6 million tons annually. You have that number given sometimes, but very, very often you don't have it, but you just have a number of projects a company is involved in, so you could write down 6 projects. In some companies are a bit more clear and say how much inferred tons are probably in the ground, how much tons they think the whole reserve will have, but it still doesn't give you any information about how much of this coal will be mined per year. And again, very few companies have a clear estimate this will be a 6 million ton mine later, but very often also these numbers in the end, they don't match. So it's much, much harder to say what kind of mine and what will the output be of the mine that will be developed there than when you look at the coal power plants. I mean, even there, sometimes you don't know if the project will have the size in the end they announce, but for the mines, it's much more unclear. So for the time being, we, of course, in our own research list have more sophisticated information about all the projects, but not to confuse people and to have a more clear outcome, we decided just to display the countries where coal mining expansions are planned. Then here we look at the coal share of revenue. In the end, this of course doesn't only refer to mining, but for mining companies, this is often the way to, or the only way to look at a percentage criteria, because for power companies, you also have the coal share of power production. But of course, the coal share of revenue is also, or was also calculated by us when looking at the power sold, which was derived from coal, or at the income a company or the revenue a company had from selling parts for new coal power plants and so forth. For the mining companies, we really looked at how much coal was sold and what share of revenue is this here. And for mining companies, you really find this number even a lot in annual reports, but many times you also don't find it. And in these cases, either we could make an estimate, like for Acacia coal, or there we say, for example, you see over 90% of coal share of revenue is what we estimated because we only found correlated activities in all the informations of the company. So we guess it will probably be 100% revenue, but it's an estimate. We called it more than 90%. Same as for Adani Enterprises, where we estimated over 50%. So you can clearly see it, Christina said before, where we made estimates. There's here you find, especially in this part, lots of places where there's just an A, so not available. We put that in here because we were certain there is a coal share of revenue, but we just can't calculate it because the information given is too little. But to show we looked at it and there's something given, we put the NA here. Annual coal production, I guess, explains itself. We calculated it down to a million metric tons because you have another system in the US. We always transferred it to metric tons. And then the last two columns, in order to give you a bit of information of what was our main sources. Of course, we have more clear sources in our own research source sheet. So if you have specific questions to a certain company, we can also provide you with more data. But publicly displaying, we only wanted to have the main website and the latest annual or financial report which we could find in the list. This is usually annual reports from 2015 or 16, few cases a bit older, and sometimes you only have a website only. In some cases, you don't find annual reports, especially for smaller companies. Yeah, I think that was that for mining. Yeah, to the criteria. Of course, especially when it comes not only to looking at a single company, but when it is more about sorting this huge global call exit list a certain way. For example, if an investor is saying we want to adopt the 30% criteria, what does it mean? Which companies would be on the list, on our divestment list? Therefore, we thought it's really important to have some columns where you can sort the companies according to which criteria they fulfill. So first of all, you have the absolute criteria. So there you can sort via either 20 million tons or 10,000 megawatt or just both. I hope you're all familiar with filters, but I guess if you played around with the list, you are. Then, of course, you also have the coal share of revenue criteria after you can filter, and coal share of power production accordingly, and expansion plans. This is also in one column, but you can of course filter just via power expansion or just via mining expansion or both again. We also found it very important to have like one column for filtering out subsidiaries and joint ventures. So because what is important to mention here, again, like all parent companies, so everything in blue here does fulfill one of these criteria to be on the list. So subsidiaries and joint ventures, we listed because they belong to the parent company. Of course, everything we found which had to do with coal, we made sure it is on the list. For all other subsidiaries, we might not have everything on the list. Some companies have lots of subsidiaries and have more and less every year, you never know. So we're sure there's much more than we're providing here, but the subsidiaries are just on the list because they are subsidiaries, and in some cases we have additional information about them, and in others not. So if you want to make sure that you just have the parent companies where you know they fulfill one of the criteria listed, you have to hide the subsidiaries, and then you have a more clear picture of the 775 parents. And maybe to say here again, from our point of view, every responsible investor should divest all subsidiaries which belong to a coal parent. So that's why we list the subsidiaries no matter if they fulfill the criteria or not. But that's for sure a point of discussion. So what can you do with these filters? What we did to also make it better, more easy to grasp the content of the global call exit list was, for example, we had a look at who are the biggest mining companies, how many companies are responsible for the annual coal production, or in this case, half of the annual coal production. So of about like 300 companies that do as a main thing mining on our list, 30 of them are responsible for more than the half of the annual coal production, for 3,691 million tons to be precise. Yeah, you can go on, Sven. So in order to sort them, you have 3 additional columns from the 3 lists we provided. The top 120 of their kind. And so if you look at the 120 biggest mining companies, according to annual production, we sorted them from 1 to 20. Every company which is displayed in green is part of the 30 which are responsible for half of the annual coal production. And you can clearly see here Coal India is the number 1, Xinhua Group is number 2, and Xinhua at the same time is also the 6th biggest power company in the world by installed capacity. You have these odd numbers of 1.5 and 2.5 and so on to make sure that you have all subsidiaries also displayed if you sort the column 120 biggest mining companies via also descending or ascending, depending on how you want to do it. The same you can do, of course, for coal power. So similar number, 31 companies are responsible for half of the world's installed capacity, more precise 983,000 megawatts. And the same way you sort them is again with this one of these first columns, 120 biggest power companies by installed capacity. And again, you can just sort them from 1 to 120, and you will have all the subsidiaries displayed. And you can see at the same time, are they on an important place also in the mining rank, or are they part of the 120 coal plant developers? Yeah, coming to the coal plant developers, here it's a little bit different the way we sort it. First of all, also here, of course, you can look at the biggest coal plant developers. 55 companies on the list are planning more than 3 gigawatt of new coal-fired power plants. At the same time, they are also responsible for over half of the global coal plant pipeline for 473.3 gigawatts. Barbara wants to ask a question on that. Okay. You're on mute, Christina.
Yeah, Barbara, have a good rest of your day. And if you have any additional questions, you can just always email me. All right. Take care.
Okay, so the top coal plant developers on the left side, we didn't sort them 1 by 120 because we did not only chose them because of their size. As Christina explained before, we had different criteria for that. But of course, you can choose on the left side only the top coal plant developers by choosing only XPC as the core parents or XPS as the subsidiaries, which are important for coal plant development. And then again, you can sort this list via size. And like this, you have them sorted by expansion plans.